Hello. All right. We're going to unpack this Vevor diesel heater, or also known as a Chinese diesel heater. This is a 5 kW unit. I picked up 2 of these. I've got one installed. I'll go over the install of the one that I have done already in a later video. But I just want to go over the unpacking of this and show you what all you get. These are currently $100 on Amazon, and that is a steal in my opinion. I'm using one of them downstairs in my garage to just take the edge off, if you will. It's very cold here in the winter. I like to work out in my garage at night, and the heater does a nice job. Again, it's just taking the edge off. It doesn't heat the room. It's a 20 by 40 garage with a 10.5 foot ceiling, so as you can imagine, it's a lot of space to heat, and it's got a big concrete slab for a floor. So let's go over what you get for $100. This is a 10-liter fuel tank. The fuel tank is not ready to be installed. You have to either drill here or drill here and install the drain that's in there somewhere. You got to get that out. It's pretty easy to do. I used a string to go through the hole that I put in the one that I installed, and then ran the drain pipe down and pulled it through and put the nut on the O-ring on the inside and on the outside. Or maybe it was just on the outside for the O-ring, I don't remember. This one, I'm probably going to get one of those top-down fuel pipe standoffs to go in here and not use the drain on the bottom. I've read things online where people say that these will ultimately leak from the bottom. I'm not installing it in a vehicle, maybe it won't, but it just seems to make sense to spend the extra few dollars to get a unit that you can run from the top, and then you don't have any issues with it leaking in the bottom. So this is it. This is a 10-liter fuel tank. You can mount it like this, or you can mount it like that, and that's why they put 2 flat spaces on there to put the drain pipe in. So next, let me set that aside. Next, you've got this amazing manual, which is interesting and fun to try to read. I've learned everything I know about these Chinese diesel heaters on YouTube. I'm going to put a link to a couple of the channels that I've used that have been incredibly instructive. Nice diagram that's slightly out of focus, some instructions, and again, these are not great instructions, and I pretty much just don't use those. This is the base of the heater. This goes underneath it, and we'll cover that when we get to that. So you get a box of goodies in here. This is the fuel pipe that they give you, and although I don't have any information that says otherwise, everybody on their YouTube channel says, oh, get rid of this stuff, it's junk. So I did, and I went with the hard nylon install on the one that I'm going to show you in a later video. So that's about another $10–15 worth of parts, I guess, to replace this and get all the pieces that go with that. And if what everybody says is true, that this stuff's no good, well then great. I think the nylon pipe looks a little bit better and seems a little bit more robust for an install of something with diesel fuel. So I did get rid of this on the install that I did, but it does come with it. You get a bag of parts, O-clamps, some twist ties or zip ties, and the only real useful thing I found in here that I used in my install was, open this up, the fuel filter, and I ended up using this on my install. Everything else, well, maybe I used some of these clamps, but oh, actually I take that back. This is for the fuel pump to mount that. I used that as well. All right, I think that's it. I think that's everything I used. I used some higher quality O-clamps on my exhaust, and I'll show you that later as well. You get your exhaust pipe, and this is a very short exhaust pipe on a standalone unit I have upstairs. I actually did use this, running it outside of a window, but for going through the wall, I ended up buying a new pipe, and I've got a even longer pipe coming for, because I'm going to move this heater that I've got installed right now. These are for the ducts that bring the heat out, and you can hook this up in any way that makes sense to you. I end up just using one pipe and a redirector to direct the air. This, of course, you need. This is the wiring harness. This goes to the unit. This is a fuse, and this goes to the fuel pump, and this is what you use to power it. I ended up, actually, this goes to the controller in the front. And there you go. There's your negative wire, and there's a positive in there somewhere. We'll go over all this and how I hooked up the power supply that plugs in the wall. You do not run these on wall current, you run these on 12 volts. Now you can convert your wall current to 12 volts, and that's what I'm going to show you using a power supply. But I've read some reviews online where people were like, I tried to plug it in the wall and it smoked. Well, yeah, this is a 12 volt unit. It's meant for installing in a vehicle, not in your home. So again, PVC ductwork. This is an essential part right here. This is the fuel pump, and when we hook up the fuel pump, or I'll show you my install of the fuel pump, you'll see that this is the direction that goes towards your fuel, and this goes towards the heater unit, and then you plug this in and it starts ticking away, pumping fuel. This is the muffler that goes on the exhaust pipe, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. This is the air intake pipe and the air intake filter. Now this isn't actually a filter, more or less a screen. You do want to install this. This keeps bugs from crawling up this and going into your heater and clogging up the works, so you definitely want to install this unit. And it actually seems to make it a little bit quieter. I don't know, maybe not when it's running, but this is your air intake. So real quick, let's talk about the exhaust, because some people get a little confused, and I've seen some videos online of some questionable installs. You want the exhaust to run outside, and you want this pipe to go all the way outside before you put the muffler on. You don't want the muffler inside, then another piece of pipe going outside. And the reason for that is this muffler is not airtight. And there is a weep hole in the bottom of this. Hopefully that was in frame. There's a weep hole in the bottom of this, and in that weep hole you could see that if you install this correctly, with this mounted vertically outside, any condensation is going to run down that weep hole and drip out. You don't want this inside. This is not an airtight seal. So keep that in mind when you install this. Alright, so I think that covers the big bag of box of pieces. Let's fuel pump back in there, and let's get to the heater. Throw that back in there. This we need, or we could need, and let's get into the heater. So the heater comes with a controller, and the controller plugs into that wiring harness. The wiring harness plugs into the heater, and there's a remote control, and you can pair that all up, and maybe I'll go over that in a later video on how that works. So this is your controller, and then this is the actual heater right here. Now, the heater is supposed to be mounted like this, with the exhaust and the intake and the fuel pipe going down. I've heard that you can mount it horizontally as long as you have the glow plug side of the heater up. And we'll take a look at what that means in just a second. Actually, the glow plug is on this side on this heater. I know that because I've opened this one up. So on the bottom of the heater, you've got your air intake, your fuel intake, and these are the two that are closest together. They visually don't look much different when you initially get the heater. So air intake, fuel intake, and believe me, you'll know if you've got them backwards if you hook it up backwards. When you hook this up, you can use one of those O-clamps on the air intake. That's not so critical. On the exhaust, I use exhaust cement and a aftermarket clamp to really tighten that down and get an airtight seal there. There is a gasket, that's this gasket right here, that's on the bottom of this. Now, on another standalone unit I have, this gasket started melting and smelled really bad. I've read reports online of people that have these gaskets that smell bad. The gasket's supposed to be made out of silicone, not rubber, but it would appear in the rush to copy these, some of these have been made out of rubber. So keep that in mind. You can also run this without the gasket, but if you do, you'll notice that there is an air gap here, and air that's coming into the heater that's supposed to heat up and come out the front of the heater can escape down here. Now, is that an issue for you? It may or may not be a huge issue, but I like to get as much heated air coming out the front as possible, so I use this gasket. In fact, on the unit that I have that had the gasket melt, I bought a replacement silicone gasket, and so far so good. So you want this to seal around the base of this, and this plate right here is meant to mount on here like so. You take off the cover for the fuel and you mount this like that, and there are bolts in that bag like so, and then when you tighten that down, it will seal up the base of that. Is this necessary, this piece here? I don't think so, but they include it and you might as well use it. I guess you could use that if you're mounting it in a vehicle. That would be helpful. Now let's pop this open real quick and take a look at what's inside here. So to open this up, you unscrew the back side, and then you can lift off the cover and get to the innards of it. So this is the fan, or one of the fans, that blows cold air in over this unit, and then the air blows out. There's an internal fan, and maybe if I do a later video where I take one of these apart, that brings in the air from the intake, and that provides the combustible air that gets mixed with fuel, combusted in the chamber, and then goes out as exhaust. Some people will say you want your combustible air to come from outside, you don't want to run it inside. Well, my garage is insulated, it's well built, I don't know if it's airtight. I'm not really worried about using up combustible air in the house. In my main house, I run a wood stove, and that's bringing in combustible air from the bottom of the stove from inside the house, and knock on wood, we're okay, and nothing's happened yet. I've also got a carbon monoxide detector here and in the house. Anyway, let's talk about the unit here. If you wanted to take this out, you could take this gasket off, and then this lifts right out of this housing right here, but we don't need to do that. There's just one thing I wanted to show you, or a couple things I wanted to show you. One is the glow plug. That's this piece right here, and to get to the glow plug, you gently pull this seal off, and be careful with this because these wires can separate from the glow plug, and that would render your touch. And hopefully you can see the glow plug in here. Now, I've read some reviews on Amazon, of course, that said glow plug showed up and the glow plug was loose. So I think it's a good idea to check that. Unfortunately, to check that, you need a special tool, which I happen to have, and I'm going to go over and grab in just a second. If you don't have that special tool, some people are reaching down in there with needle nose pliers and testing if the glow plug is tight or not. I don't recommend that. That's not a proper way to check a plug of any type, spark plug, glow plug, whatever. You could pull this out, pull the ECU off of here, pull the top end of the unit apart, and then reach in there with a 12mm wrench and check if the glow plug's tight. Fortunately, and I'm going to go over this in just a second, I have a glow plug wrench that I'm going to go grab real quick. Alright, so this is what the glow plug looks like. I bought a replacement glow plug and aerator screen and gasket set just to have on hand. I think it was 12 bucks or 15, I don't remember. I figure since I have 4 of these heaters, I might as well have some spare parts. Anyway, it comes with this glow plug wrench, and you can see here, this is the glow plug. This is a protective cover on it, and what this does is it allows you to go in like so and remove the glow plug without taking the motor or burner fully apart. So what I would do is I would take this, go over the wires like so, and then attach to the glow plug and then check if it's tight. Now I'm just checking it finger tight. It is definitely tight. I can't budge it. So this glow plug was tightened at the factory. I'm not concerned with it being loose. Therefore, I'm going to slide this back on here. Glow plug. So other things that are on this unit, there's this is the temperature sensor, and this goes into the ECU board right here, electrical control unit. And in addition to that, there's your glow plug. This is the harness that goes out to the main wiring harness and ultimately to the controller in the front. This is the control for the fan motor, to turn the fan motor. You've probably heard people say things like, you have to shut these units down correctly, otherwise they'll self-destruct. In other words, you don't want to shut the power off to these. And the reason for that is this ECU unit is mounted inside the heater unit. And if you turn this off, it's going to get very, very hot in here and could possibly fry this unit. On one of my standalone units, I have accidentally turned it off twice without powering it down correctly, and two things happened. One, out the air intake, there was some white smoke coming out, and that was unburnt diesel fuel in the chamber coming out the air intake. And two, this little part here that mounts to the motor got a little bit melted. Nothing else got fried. Am I saying it's a good idea to do that? Absolutely not. Don't turn this off without it going through the shutdown procedure properly. I'm just saying that in my case, I did it twice and the unit did not self-destruct. I would not try doing it again, and I wouldn't do it on purpose. So, put this back together here. We'll put the cover back on. And then this screws on here. And this unit is ready to be installed. And in the next video, I'm going to go over the setup of the electrical supply unit that I set up for my install, and I'll show you the install that I have currently with this exact model heater. This one's going to go in the front of the garage. My plan is to run two of these in the garage as necessary, one if I'm working on my truck up in front, and the other when I'm in the back here. And again, these heaters put out a good amount of heat. I don't think I don't have any hopes of heating the entire garage with it. Again, it's 20 foot by 40 foot with 10.5 foot wall ceiling, and there's just no way this little heater is going to heat that whole thing. But it does take the edge off of the area you're working in, and it makes it pretty comfortable out here. So I hope that answers any questions you have about what's included in these kits. Again, for $100 right now on Amazon, you can't really go wrong, and I'll see you in the next video.